Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Buzzing with Barca podcast. And today we only have our dear colleague Kai, or also known as Juego de Posesión on Twitter. So, how are you, Kai?
I'm fine. What about you?
I'm doing all right. This week has been a great week for Barcelona, and we'll be covering a lot of topics this for this recording, and we'll start with the great win versus Juventus. So, what are your thoughts about that game?
Well, I think essentially it's a good win, especially for Koeman, because he faced uncertainty when we had Sevilla, when we had Getafe, and I think that it just gives him probably a bit more confidence and reassurance. And so that's why I think that probably more than on the sportive level, it was a good win when it comes to confidence, because we also saw a few players like Messi who seemed much more happier than usual. So for me, it was essentially a confidence boost.
Yeah, exactly. We saw Messi, being more involved. I think that this was his best game. Even Griezmann for me, even though sometimes he didn't take the shot really well, I saw him much more involved in the build up of the game. Even Pedri, he was fantastic. And yeah, other than that, there's not much to cover. Um, and yeah, as you said, Coleman did, some great things. We have to credit him when it's due. At first, I was a bit shocked about Sergi Roberto playing instead of Dest. I was a bit mad, but as the game went on, he did pretty well. So, what do you think about Sergi Roberto's involvement in the game?
Anyway, so yeah, I first thought originally like you that I was like, why would you put Sergio Roberto if Dest played well against Madrid? But the thing is, I actually think at the end it was a good decision, because what you could see, especially in the build-up, is that you could see a back three forming, our GCBs plus Roberto, and I think Roberto did well in that role, because in a certain sense, we try to dominate off the midfield, and when you have Roberto, you essentially have someone that in the build-up will drift towards the midfield, and therefore he'll create more superiorities in the midfield, which is of course very important, and that's why I think Dest would have done equally well, but what I think is that Roberto is quite suited to that role. Now the thing is, it worked because it was Juventus. Juventus
Yeah.
was not the best. I won't say it's the best ever we've seen. So I think it worked against that. Now the question is whether Koeman will use Roberto in such matches where he thinks Roberto will do well, or and then have still Dest as his main, or will he alternate? Now that's the question for me.
Yeah, same here. I think it was the last podcast where Marco raised the question where if we were to play a game like, Liverpool at Anfield, would Coleman still start with the same starting back, like the four, like Longley, Alba, Pique, and Sergio Roberto? Would he still do that? So I think, like, I'm not sure yet, but with what we've seen him do so far, it feels like that. And yeah, I guess we can move on to the next topic about Pedri Mania. Like how everything is, it's quite crazy how Sport and Mundo Deportivo, put him on the poster of their newspaper covers, and it was quite crazy because at first everyone didn't know who he was. He was just a kid from Las Palmas, but now, on a big stage versus Juventus in the Champions League, he has established himself and, kind of gained attention from all sorts of football legends. So
Yeah,
what are your thoughts about it?
definitely agree, especially that I think it was the right timing, because we saw him against Madrid. This right wing didn't work out for him, and many I saw that, and I guess actually those comments were appropriate, saying that maybe what if he wasn't ready to play such a big game. But then against Juventus, Pedri proved that wrong, because he was basically saying, I'm here to stay, I'm here to perform, and I will contribute to the team like no one else. you don't have anyone who's like Pedri. Because yes, you have very good CAMs, like you have Riqui, you have Coutinho, eventually you have even Messi or Griezmann. But Pedri probably is amongst the most versatile, not only versatile in the sense of he can play multiple positions, but that he can adapt to context. That is what, for me, is probably what Pedri, why Pedri shines so much. It's because he actually understands the game in the sense that he understands where he needs to be and when, and therefore he can adapt to any position you give him. Probably not on the right so far, but so far on the left, between the left wing and the center CAM, he has just adapted at any point. He goes to the left when he needs to, he goes to the center when he needs to, and that is why for me Pedri is such important, because at Barcelona, for me, especially for the GDP, you need someone who adapts to the context of the game. And for me, Pedri is that guy who literally will understand what he needs to do.
Yeah, he's just 17. I'm 17, and it's crazy to see someone so intelligent on the ball. When someone needs to defend, he comes back, he helps out. Players like, we saw Dembele even when he was quite old, initial stages, like, and he maybe even now, like, we see him not track back, not do this, but Pedri at this stage, at this age, it's quite remarkable, and I think it's deserved. And I think Coleman also needs to be, appreciated for this, because, easily he could have started someone else on the left-hand side, maybe Trincao, or maybe switch Dembele and Trincao. And, because of his poor performance against Real, but that was mostly because of his position. But yeah, I guess credit to Coleman and even also Coutinho for being injured. Yeah, we can move on to the next topic of Griezmann and Dembele and how they're performed against Juventus and how they're doing as a whole, like throughout this season. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that eventually, what I think with Griezmann is that he's done better than usual against Juventus. And that is, I think, what I'd like to raise is that I think that if you consider them as in the midfield, I think that the profiles of Messi and Griezmann complement much better than Messi and Coutinho. Now, that is because the nature of Messi and Coutinho are pretty much the same, in the sense that they're both natural 10s. While Griezmann, you could see him popping out in certain half spaces and doing these combinations with Messi. Yeah. And I think that's the important thing, because at the moment where Messi drops very deep to the point where he's literally just no midfielder, you need someone who's still high up. And that's Griezmann for you. Now, the question is, will he continue to play like that? Because obviously, Coutinho is only injured for 3 weeks. So, I mean, at some point, probably Coutinho is going to come back, and then we still have the same problem with Griezmann. Who do you play, who you don't play? Now, concerning Dembele, I think he did really well. And that's where I'll give once again credit to Koeman, because that's where I'll come back with Roberto, is that because Roberto was more involved in the midfield, he attracted a few players. And now that leaves, when you attract these players with Griezmann, with Messi, Dembele is left alone 1 versus 1 or 1 versus 2. And that is beneficial for Dembele, because where Dembele actually is the best is when he exactly has this open spaces and these 1v1 situations. And he proved it on his goal that basically if you 1v1, you're pretty much lost against him. Which is why for me, actually Dembele performed well.
Yeah, exactly. We have seen him on the left-hand side a lot this season, and putting him on the right-hand side is just something different. And we just see, him in his natural state, I believe, just more confident. And as you said, credit to Koeman for putting Sergi Roberto. That kind of created a natural environment for him and just natural, ambience for him to, excel in. And for Griezmann, it's quite difficult because, of course, he played well, but and he created some link-up plays with Messi, and it shows you how intelligent he is as a player. Maybe that's not how Coutinho is. I don't think Coutinho is as intelligent as a footballer like Griezmann, but in the end, we needed a person to replace Suarez in that sense. And a lot of fans still think of that, we need a person who scores goals and links up with Messi. But as of now, we're not seeing that type of Griezmann who can get into those positions and just be ruthless in shooting the ball and getting the ball back in the net. But I mean, at least we're seeing some progress, right? So what are your thoughts about that?
Definitely, it's the thing that as we've seen so far, Griezmann has just been underperforming when it comes to goals or just expected goals. He doesn't really show that sort of clinicality he showed at Atletico Madrid. And the thing is, I totally agree that it was encouraging to see his performance, because many of us thought it's just his confidence. And I think essentially when you give him a game like that, especially when it's like a higher position like Juventus, you basically see Griezmann can still play if he's on this position. It's not his natural position, and as you said, he won't be your ruthless 9 like Suarez. You should actually search for him for that, because as far as I remember, he almost never actually got more than 20 goals per season. So forget that idea of having Suarez, and that's the problem, is that many fans saw in Griezmann what he never was.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is the question now. What's going to happen? Is Koeman still going to play him on the right wing? Will Koeman still try to steer competition between Griezmann and Coutinho on the center? That's for me the question that Koeman has to answer once Coutinho is fit again.
Yeah, same here, because I believe that it's either Coutinho or Griezmann, not both of them. Otherwise, it's just a chaos in the attacking department for Barcelona. And before we move on to the next topic, I just wanted to say how Dembele's presence, we haven't seen it much, and we can transition to the next topic by saying that Messi got on the score sheet during the game versus Juventus, but it was a penalty. And always these are the fans on Twitter and all these social media platforms that say, oh, he hasn't scored from open play, blah blah blah. So what is your response?
Well, my response is that basically just like results, if you're judging a player just on goals or just on a team based on results, I don't think you're seeing the full game. For me, the fact is that when you look at Messi's average positions, and I probably could do a pass map if needed, the fact is that Messi was much deeper, because Messi understood that basically what was needed at some point was taking this open center that nobody was taking. I mean, taking, yes, but not in the sense that that we needed. Because Messi, eventually he took up 2 roles, which is first controlling the game like Xavi and breaking the lines like Iniesta. He did both.
Yeah.
So for me, when you look at all the chances he has created, or all the through balls he has actually performed, you cannot say it's a poor display. For me, the finishing will come back. I think basically what happened is that we saw Messi unhappy earlier, and it's hard really to celebrate and actually score goals if you're unhappy. But now, you saw Messi even celebrating much more in his celebrations, and I think that's what basically made it that he performed better. So for me, the finishing will come back soon.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. It's people don't realize that Messi's just, not a person who stays up front and scores goals. He creates chances. He does basically everything for Barcelona, especially in these recent years. And what do you say to the people who argue that, why has Messi only decided to play well or turn up and score goals and seem happy after Bartomeu left? What do you say to those people?
I think, actually, I do think it has changed a lot for him. Because for me, Messi wanted to leave because he saw this board not having a project. And I think just like most of us, we never actually really expected Bartomeu to resign because of his policies, etc. And I think basically when you go into Messi's mindset, so you see the guy that you really probably hated going back, going away. You cannot be happier. It's like for children that one teacher that you had goes away. You couldn't be happier. And now, essentially, depending, he knows that the elections are in, I think, 9th or 10th of January, according to Cadena said. He knows that there is a light of hope. There is a hope that somebody like Laporta or Font has a project, and he knows that because I'm pretty sure he knows he knows Laporta anyway, and I'm pretty sure he has heard about Font. So for me, there's this shine of hope for him, which makes it that he performed better.
Yeah, totally agree. And you created a perfect segue for us to go to the the best topic I think we can all possibly discuss. A topic we wouldn't have imagined a few months back, that Bartomeu out. He has resigned. What are your first words?
Well, the first word is that Barcelona is gone away. That's gonna be my first words. Secondly, credit to Bartomeu for getting me suspended. And thirdly, finally, thank you, because what I feared is that he'd resign, and I feared that the board would not resign. Now, the good thing is, I was wrong when I saw that, well, eventually, actually, his board resigned. Now, Bartomeu is out, and his board, etc., which is just amazing. But what worries me slightly is when you heard Busquets. Busquets basically saying, we will continue the economic policies of the previous board, and we will continue to stay in touch with them. Now, that is, for me, as one Spanish Twitter user said, a massive disrespect to all those that voted for the motion. Because the exact problem of this board and of Bartomeu was the economic policy, and then with that come Inglamasia. So continue, this begins worrying. Now, of course, I won't get to conclusions. I will wait to see. I don't think we'll see anything on winter transfer market, but if we'll see what happens. But so far, I must say I'm not too content with what I heard. But for me, it's fine as long as they hold the elections as they should, because that's their only role.
Yeah, same here. And I'm just like you, I was like, okay, finally, thank God this has happened. But I wasn't as excited because from what I saw online, it was like, even though Bartomeu is out, he's not really out, because I might be wrong, but I think Ramon Planes, the sporting director, is still working. He's still going to be in charge of the transfers, from what I know. And that is still worrying, considering that, there might not be a new board until the winter transfer market. So that's worrying. And we can move on to, this subsection of, who is your ideal candidate. I think we both are pro Font. We want Victor Font to win. We want him to be the new Barça president, to start a new chapter in this club we love. So what are your hopes for this election?
Same. I hope for Font, but equally I must say we can't forget what Laporta has done, because obviously if he manages to get the club going to the extent he did in his earlier presidency, then I have no problem. Now, the reason why I'd want Font is because I'm looking for innovation. Yes, it might seem risky, but my point is that Font would bring a breath of fresh air. You're sure that you're not getting any nostalgia, and secondly, it's equally with Laporta, but with Font that you will get a simpler structure when it comes to becoming a socio and emotion, essentially through electronic voting, easing the process of becoming a socio, and just generally he does seem to be very democratic in a certain way. Now I'm hoping that, and I believe that he will actually do what he says, And that is why I do believe that Font will actually continue.
Yeah, much like you. I mean, he has literally been working for this project, his presidency candidate, for 7 years. And, he was meant to run in 2015, but he didn't because he felt it wasn't good enough. And, that just shows a lot about him as a person, as a candidate. And much like you, I feel like he's a progressive person. Not only is he thinking about the future of our club, he's also thinking about making it easier for the socios, for people to vote, making it electronic, and just making everything easier. Equally, I wouldn't be sad to see Laporta win because I know what he has done for the club, but I just want someone else to start something new for just a new chapter to begin the club. And the timer has rang, and we can move to the next topic about the best right back, because we have seen Dest start, but he's only started a couple of games. We saw his best game against Real Madrid in the Clásico, which is quite remarkable for a 19-year-old person. And we have also seen Sergi Roberto. He has not had his best moments as a right back in Barcelona, but we also saw how he can help the team against Juventus. So what is your say?
Well, my say is that essentially, I do think Dest has impressed me much more than I thought he would. I mean, I already loved him, but the aspect, and that came especially against Madrid, is that he impressed me defensively, because we all know Roberto. On his day, he can be great offensively, but what we lacked is the defense. And even Semedo, in the last days, he also defensively, it was nothing. And Dest, he has that. And that doesn't matter if he was a right back or a left back. At both, we saw this intention that defensively, on 1v1s, he's not the one to say, okay, I decide to not defend. He will track back. Not only he will track back, but he didn't have easy opponents. I mean, when you had against Getafe, Nyon, that guy physically is imposing. And to have Dest, which I'm pretty sure isn't physically as strong, to contain him is an achievement. And when you consider the fact that offensively he did just as great, you're like, oh my god, this is something. So for me, what will happen, and I hope to happen, is that Dest will be most probably the starter, but then in a few games where Koeman thinks that Roberto suits more his plan, he will put Roberto.
Yeah. Much like you, seeing Dest and actually knowing about Dest signing, I wasn't really sure about him because I hadn't watched a lot. The only things I saw from him were attacking plays. So him in the Clásico, essentially just pocketing Vinicius all game. It was quite, astounding to me. It was quite surprising as well. So that side to his game, and as Barcelona's defense currently, we all know that it's just terrible at the moment. So I feel like Dest can add both defensively and going forward. And for Sergi Roberto, I still feel like Dest is my preferred left back. But I feel like Sergi Roberto can still play a part for the team, especially in games like versus Juventus. So that's my say on it. And if you have anything else to say, you can go ahead, or we can move to the next.
Yeah, I'll totally agree that the sense that Roberto was never supposed to be a starter. He was more of a squad player. He's more of someone who played a few games, but was never supposed to start 38 games per season. And that is for me why I never really blamed him, just like Pique or Schwartz for their bad performances. You cannot expect such players to always perform on the top level of European standards, which is for me why I'd actually say that so far I'm pretty happy with Koeman, because we have to remember, we may mock Roberto as much as we want, but the fact is he's the fourth captain, which means that he has not only the respect of the club but the respect of his teammates, because they get to choose. So that's why I believe that actually, so far, the Dest Roberto so-called competition has been good.
Yeah, agree with you. Like, I might not agree with the fact that he is the fourth captain, but as you say, in the locker room, things are different. There are things which we may not know, and if the people think that he is fit enough to lead the group, then so be. And now we move on to the topic of Pjanic or Busquets. Who should play regularly or who should be benched? We saw Pjanic start in the game versus Juventus against his former club, and to my expectations, he played really well. Well, Busquets did have a cameo. He did come on in the second half because of the Araujo's injury, and he also helped us. I was not, I was quite skeptical about his substitution, but he actually ended up game. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that actually that's the type of robbery I search in Pjanic, in the sense that we both know they're not the youngest, but I do think Pjanic has been higher than most of us expected him to, because most of us were like, well, we exchanged Arthur and now he's 30, so what the hell is he supposed to bring? But the fact is, more and more, I think that what will happen is that you're gonna have Pjanic and Busquets share the playtime, and I think that's perfect. Because the fact is that Busquets is very useful for organizing our teams, but cannot play 90 minutes, or not most of the time. But Pjanic is very useful to Koeman's plans, because I've said it many times, Koeman doesn't really seem to be interested in really patient build-up, and Pjanic is perfect for that, because he won't organize the team as much as Busquets, but what he'll do is, first, he'll be defensively more solid, and secondly, he'll provide those long balls. And these are the long balls Koeman wants from his midfielders. He wants these long balls that eventually will switch play, that they will enable Dembele's speed or Ansu's expertise to actually rip up these defenses. And I think that's what's going to happen. You're going to have much more through balls. And I think that's what we have so far. I saw a recent stat from Transfermarkt. So far, Busquets has had about the double of Pjanic minutes, has around 328, and Pjanic has around 120 something. So for me, the perfect would be 50-50, depending on the position.
Yeah, exactly. And Pjanic, we may not agree with this transfer. It may not be ethical, but he is quite essential to Koeman's plans. And a trend, or just a thing I've seen or noticed, is that Pjanic has started the games in Champions League. It may only be 2 games, but he started all of them. And he hasn't really established himself in La Liga. Do you think that this might be Koeman's plan to utilize Pjanic more in the Champions League, maybe because of his fitness, and keep Busquets fresh for those games against some La Liga clubs? So what is your thought about how they should be
That's a
playing?
good point you've made, because honestly I hadn't really noticed or thought about that, but it actually makes sense, because if you think about it, Champions League is about key moments. It's really about getting the score, getting a few games right, and there currently I think Pjanic, according to Koeman's plans, goes over Busquets. Now the fact is that in La Liga it's very different. You need consistency, and especially you need your team to be organized. Now who between Pjanic and Busquets organized is Busquets. That's no question. And essentially you've seen that, because Koeman, what he seems to want is in the first half getting a lead and then calm down. And with Pjanic you'll get that lead, because he'll provide the long balls and he'll stop the opponent from scoring goals. And then he brings out, usually on the 30th, around 30 minutes before the end, he brings on Busquets. Why? Because he wants the game to be calmer, he wants us to be more organized, and especially just to relax. We've got it. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think essentially that's what's going to happen. We're going to see Busquets starting more La Liga games, not unimportant games, but probably less magnitude than, say, the Champions League, and Pjanic starting these more important games.
Yeah, same. Like that's what I think. But I feel like Pjanic should be, starting more than Busquets. Busquets should, rest and be played like those key moments in Juventus. He was really pivotal in calming the game down because it was quite open going into the second half. We saw with Morata's, hat trick of offside goals. But Busquets really calmed the game down. He brought some composure, and those are the things you want from Busquets. And I was really happy about his. And now from one, duo battle, we can go to the other of Araujo or Pique. What are your thoughts
Well, I
on that
think
competition?
that basically what you want is Araujo to take a bit more minutes, but I do still think that he's very far from being any sort of leader Pique has been on his day. So especially you see some key moments where his position lacks, but overall, I think it's good. It's good, for example, for Araujo to show. Now it's very unfortunate for him to get injured at that time, but I do think that basically it's a good idea because for me, you need to. Now, essentially, the problem with only having Araujo is that Lenglet has no real competitor, which we actually need because I think that Lenglet actually needs some competition in order to have the level he had last season or a bit higher. So that's why I think that Araujo is great, but I do still think we need a competition on the other side, considering that Umtiti is no real competition.
Yeah, not anymore. Especially since now he is a member of the hospital. But what we can why not start both Pique and Araujo? Maybe why not experiment with Araujo on the left hand side? Even though he may not be a natural left center back, why not? Or do you think that's something we
I
can
definitely
explore?
think you can explore because the difference to when we tried back then Lenglet and Titi is that both are right-footed, which means that normally there's not much of a big problem. And essentially then you also have Araujo who can actually learn from Pique, which is great. And especially you have Araujo who's more pacey defender, so who can cope with a high line much better, while Pique, even though he doesn't have the pace, he can deal much more with this high line than Lenglet can, because Lenglet is more of a composed and isn't really that much suited to a high line. So I do think we could experiment that. Now the question is, again, you have Pique starting every game and whether he really can do that. But I do think it's worth exploring.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking about. And another thing is like what you said. I didn't get a chance to say that, but yeah, Araujo isn't the finished product, as you know. But a lot of fans everywhere is like, he should be starting, he should be doing this. But of course, he should be getting more chances. But he's not the leader that Pique is, or he's not the captain who Pique is. Even though Pique isn't the captain, he still, is a big part of the starting 11 of the team. But yeah, Araujo still needs to grow, like Colin said in his pre-match conference. But hopefully he reaches those heights and expectations that we have for him. But from what we have seen now, he's played well, and it's just, quite sad and quite concerning that he has an injury and he's out for 3 weeks. But yeah, with that sorted out, we can go to the game for Alaves. What is your starting lineup for tomorrow's game?
Personally, I would start Pique and Araujo for the simple reason that I don't think Lenglet has been up to it. Sorry.
But I would
Sorry,
like
I just
to,
noticed.
Araujo is...
So Pique Lenglet and probably then I would have Alba Dest because I don't really feel the need to rotate on the back line. However, already on the midfield, I would rotate in the sense that instead of having Frankie, I would have Alenia and then I would Busquets.
Yeah.
The reason for that is originally I wanted Puig, but oh well, he's not selected, so it's hard to play someone who's not selected. So I would get Alenia just to see how he's getting on, and especially because for me the problem, I know it's not the topic, but I'll still say it, is that the problem is that Frankie has become an untouchable in a certain sense for Koeman. Now, don't get me wrong, Frankie is a great player. There's no problem in that. But the problem is you cannot really make someone feel untouchable and expect him to perform at his best level. You need competition. It's just natural.
Yeah.
And for me, recently, it's not that Frankie has had an overall bad performance, but we know he can do better. It's really about the details. He has been getting these passes wrong. He has been getting the intentions wrong, and that's something you don't want to have. So that's why, for me, we should say, hey, okay, so you've played a lot, so let's rest you for a match, and then see when you come back how it goes. So that's why I'd say, well, Alanya, you haven't played for a long while, so let's try you out. Alaves isn't all the strongest teams. All respect to them, but you know what I'm saying. And that's why I'll have Alanya. And then on the forward, I'll have Pedri starting as center CAM. And then I'll probably have Ansu, Messi, and then I'll try Trincao.
Yeah. So you would be resting Griezmann.
Well, I would essentially bring him on the second half because I just want to see if Pedri can keep up this level, and just, still I like to have this competition. Because essentially I do think that if you bring Griezmann on the second half, he'll be more motivated to actually play well. Because obviously if you're starting, Griezmann will probably be expecting to play the 90 minutes, and that's something that shouldn't be. No player should be expected to play the whole 90 minutes. They should just be expected to play according to meritocracy at most. And for me, Pedri is slightly above there, so that's why I'll.
Yeah, my starting 11 is similar to yours, except some tweaks in the attacking department. Same backline, same goalkeeper. Don't think we can change that. Midfield, the pivot, I feel like Frankie deserves a rest. And as you said, if there's no competition, there's no improvement, and we haven't seen Frankie perform at the level he can. But he's been performing decently. But we need to get more out of him. So I was trying to think about, maybe Pjanic, Busquets, or even Alenya Pjanic, just to see what other combination of midfield we can create. As for the attacking, I was also going to, in my starting 11, I was going to bench Dembele, maybe because of an injury precaution. I was going to start Griezmann, Messi, going to start Conrad and what's his name, Trincao. That was going to be my starting 11, but I very much agree with yours as well. And with this starting 11 discussion over, we can go to the match predictions.
I'll go with something pretty optimistic, and I'll go for a 4-0 win. And that is because if you look at Alaves recently, they haven't been really all that well. They haven't really had a standout collective like in the past season. So far, I don't think we should be too afraid of them. And I do think that with the usual Koeman's pressing, you will have a lot of balls regained in their own half, which means that basically we're going to get 1 goal, 2 goals, and then after 2 goals, they'll probably almost give up, and then you can get 3-4 goals.
Yeah, I was going for 3-0 or 3-1 win. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up conceding us a clumsy goal, but I was going for a comfortable lead, and that's my expectation for tomorrow's game. And we can quickly transition to our final words, our 1-minute monologues. So if you have something prepared, you can go ahead.
So I was talking about what I saw recently on Twitter, which is that sort of Pedri vs Puig debate. Because I've seen so many say, well, no, Pedri's levels above Puig, so it's known that Puig gets benched and blah, blah, blah. Now, firstly, what I'd like to say is that it is true that so far we've seen this versatile player in Pedri who can play these multiple positions. Now the problem with that is Puig has only played 3 minutes since the beginning of the season, and then you have the preseason, he played a bit, but that is definitely not equal compared to what Pedro has gotten. Pedro has gotten more than 100 times the time, which is slightly worrying. And therefore, also I believe that they are very different players. Pedri seems more of someone who's slightly like Iniesta, but also can play on this left wing, just like Iniesta at the beginning. While Puig is more of a mix between Xavi and Iniesta. So that's why I think that basically comparing the two players makes no sense. My question would be, how about we play both? What's going to happen then? Because if you get to control matches and have Pedri as a player, I mean, how can you complain? So that's why I'd say that this Pedri-Puig debate is no debate for me. Simply just because, like Alenia, 3 minutes is not enough to judge a player. You cannot tell. It's just like Dembele, Trincao. You can't say Trincao is 10 times better because Dembele hasn't performed as much, considering the minutes he has gotten. So for me, you really have to wait until Puig gets at least the half of minutes of Pedri to say the one is better than the other.
Yeah, and this was going to be my 1 minute monologue as well, just about Riqui not being in the even the squad list. Even though you kind of compared Pedri and Puig, my talk was about Riqui not even being in the squad list. Even if Koeman said in his pre-match conference that I would rather have players working hard in the training camp rather than not being on the bench, I disagree with that, because he has already only played 3 minutes, and if you want to create more trouble for him and create more uncertainty for him, like emotionally, personally, and even mentally, then leaving him out of the squad list is the best way to diminish his confidence, and even if his confidence may be at a low. But I don't think it will affect him in the long term. It's just quite sad that Koeman doesn't even give him a chance. He doesn't even give him the chance he deserves. And it's not to compare Pedri and Riqui, but the fact that a 17-year-old who, came from another club, okay, they are different players, but the fact that, he puts in so much trust in Pedri compared to Riqui is just, quite sad for for Barca fans who have seen him, just being benched by Valverde, by Setien, and now Koeman. So hopefully things change, but personally, it's just quite sad to see. And if you'd like to add,
well, I would add that for me, when I saw the squad list and I saw him being left out, I think what's happening is basically it's a history of competition for me. What seems to happen is that for his midfielders, it seems he has sorted it out. I'm talking about Koeman, in the sense that his right DM is Pjanic or Busquets. On the left, he has Frankie, who seems to be the only one in this role. Alenia, to me, does seem slightly upper since he got selected, so I'm not sure about that. But basically, Frankie is untouchable. And then the only spot so-called left for Puig would be CAM. The problem is then you have Coutinho, Griezmann, Messi, and Pedri above him. So that was, I think, he left him out because basically there's no point in calling someone up if you're not going to play him. Let's face it. And instead he calls Conrad because we have less wingers. If he considered Ansu as a 9, the only natural winger would be actually Conrad, which is slightly worrying, but that's another discussion. So that's why I believe that basically it's a sort of competition.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll see what happens with the future of these bright stars, and we'll see what happens against the game versus Alaves. But this brings an end to this particular episode of the Barça Buzz podcast, Buzzing with Barça. If you have any final words to say, you can go ahead. But otherwise, see you guys later. Bye.